So let's talk about causation, because when you first came out, you mentioned you caused quite a stir, but the industry wanted to cancel you at almost every turn, and you published a paper in the BMI, what was it called, the BMJ?
BMJ.
Yep. And they tried to get your paper pulled. Your film has an interview with the woman who was running it at the time, who didn't know whether she was on your side or not, who was open-minded to pulling it if you had misstated facts and misled people. And she's pretty forthright about how once, they wanted to see data and so on, but they ended up not pulling it and saying to the people who were criticizing you, why don't you write a rebuttal if you feel differently? And they didn't really want to do that. So this all kind of gets to, there's an absence of honest data from the people who are telling us things like statins are perfectly safe with a very, very good side effect profile. It's not just the statin drug makers. It's drug makers, for the most part, who just, they hide information even from the people who are charged with reviewing their drugs and telling the rest of us whether their drugs are safe.
Yeah, absolutely, Megyn. So, medical knowledge is under commercial control, but most doctors don't know that. And just to give you, how bad the situation is, 20 to 50% of all healthcare activity in the United States, and you spend almost more than $4 trillion in healthcare, actually brings no benefit to the patient, is wasteful or harmful. And the reason for this is that most doctors and policymakers are unaware of the poor quality research that drives overuse in terms of over-medicated people, underuse of simpler, safer lifestyle options, avoidable adverse events, waste, and missed opportunities to give the right patient the right treatment at the right time. So that's really the major issue here. And the way to overcome this or to solve this problem is to make sure that, drug trials are independently evaluated. Or, take things further. I mean, if you look at the history of the drug industry over the last few decades, most drugs they produce are copies of old ones. They take an old generic drug, they change the molecules here and there, they patent it, make lots of money, which is, of course, a huge waste. The American taxpayer, American public are paying lots of money for something that could be a lot cheaper with an older generic drug. And then, of course, there's the harm issue, because what they do is the results of their trials that they design, they control, they analyze, they publish in medical journals, who, by the way, take a lot of money from industry as well, which comes out in the film, will grossly exaggerate the safety and benefits of those drugs. So no informed consent is truly happening. And of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if a doctor is making clinical decisions on corrupted and biased information, Megyn. At best, it's going to lead to suboptimal outcomes for patients, and at worst, it's going to do harm. And even pre-pandemic, the third most common cause of death, and this is still, when I talk about this at lectures, people gasp, even doctors. The third most common cause of death globally after heart disease and cancer is prescribed medications, according to one, analysis. So wow. It's really a massive problem. It's a major public health issue. And what the main focus, and of course, part of this Malhotra movement and what Robert Kennedy Jr. and like Jay Bhattacharya and Marty Makary want to do is, one of the most important things is to get the American population, reducing the medications they're taking, and then trying to, empower them and create environments so they can flourish from a health perspective through lifestyle.
They, like anybody who's associated with medicine, never forget the magazine world, they're on a different page, wants you to lose weight. Any real doctor is against obesity, which is probably the number one or a huge risk factor for so many diseases, including diabetes, which just doesn't lead anyplace good. And what they have said on this show and elsewhere is eat better, move more, right? Like that's really what we're looking to do, and throw out that food pyramid and stop, eating 6 to 10 grains a day and so on. What we've done over in America, and now increasingly in other parts of the world, is take Ozempic. And I get the pushback to Ozempic as that's not the answer. Eat better and exercise more. But this film, like some other pieces and books and films, has suggested it's worse than that. Like Ozempic actually is in the category of violating the do no harm rule. Like it actually may be more dangerous than it is beneficial. And I want to ask you about that, because the whole thing is reducing inflammation, and this drug helps one eat less and therefore potentially reduce inflammation. It was recently cited in a medical article saying it may reduce your risk for Alzheimer's because of its reduction in risk for inflammation for the people who take it.
What I would say first and foremost is that when it comes to medical journal articles, remember there's industry-sponsored trials. So if it comes from the drug industry, just don't believe any of it. And that is, in my view, that's the view of Catherine DeAngelis, one of the earliest editors of JAMA. With Ozempic, one of the issues with Ozempic is it basically stops you. It controls, it reduces appetite massively. But the issue with Ozempic, which is of great concern, is that when you lose weight, you want to lose body fat. You don't lose muscle, and you basically end up losing 50% muscle, 50% body fat. There are all these other side effects that again are underreported in the trials that we're now seeing in the real world, including stomach paralysis, nausea, vomiting. I think it probably has a role, Megyn, in a very, very small minority of people who have tried everything and are morbidly obese and are really struggling. But I think 99% of people who are taking Ozempic shouldn't be on it. I think it's going to do more harm than good. I think it has to be through a lifestyle change.
Here's Dr. Robert Lustig in the piece talking about how it works. SOT 35.
Yes, there is a 16% weight loss. What is that weight? Turns out it's equal amounts of fat and muscle. Losing as much muscle as fat is not a good thing. These two drugs, semaglutide and also the third one, tirzepatide, lead to nausea, vomiting, pancreatitis, and now there's a warning label on Ozempic for gastroparesis, which means stomach not moving, stomach paralyzed. Stomach turns to stone. And guess what? It lasts way beyond the discontinuation of the drug. In fact, that's why the drugs work, is because you can't eat. Because it delays gastric emptying. It delays your stomach from being able to move the food along. You think that's a great way to lose weight? In fact, if you can't eat, that's starvation. Well, the fat and the muscle shows that's how it works.
Stomach to stone. I have not heard about that side effect from these drugs. What's that?
Well, it's just basically, it just means that the stomach stops working. The peristalsis, usually what passes food through our body, basically just becomes just stops essentially, and then probably hardens up. Yeah.
Why are people dropping dead? Megyn. I mean, that seems like it would kill you quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, those people get admitted to the hospital and probably get put on drips and everything else, and they wait till things start to improve. So it won't necessarily kill you, but it's not very good. It's not ideal.
Not pleasant. Yeah. Okay. So back to the problem of the non-disclosure of information and of Big Pharma controlling the messaging around their drugs. I did not realize that sort of the birth of these so-called scientific magazines involved Big Pharma, and that was kind of all part of the plan. The way I understand it from Do No Pharm, your film, is of all people, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was in on the ground floor of forging this unholy alliance. And we have a little clip from the movie Do No Pharm about this. I'd love to watch it, then have you explain what happened here. SOT 31.
Vastly profitable commercial model underpinning the modern medical publishing industry was established by the controversial British business titan Robert Maxwell. Maxwell recognized and exploited the appeal of scientific notoriety amongst researchers and scientists to win their approval for hundreds of new journal titles and their participation as unpaid peer reviewers. With research content willingly provided by drug companies, the Maxwell model married a free-of-charge content and peer review process with a lucrative subscription model to generate unheard-of profit margins for a publishing business. Maxwell sold his empire for more than $500 million in 1991. But his fingerprints remain on one of the world's most profitable publishing opportunities.
The father of Jeffrey Epstein's longtime partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. It says the headline of the article underlying the quote was the man who bought and sold science. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I think, what this highlights again, Megyn, and, when we had a screening in London, the Leicester Square Odeon, there were a lot of doctors that came, and they were absolutely shocked with what they heard, because Fiona Godley, the former editor of the BMJ, who's been a giant medical publishing, she basically says, that medical journals are essentially businesses. Now, as a doctor that, has been conventionally trained, we were taught that if it's published in a medical journal, the Lancet or, JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine, Megyn, that it was like gospel truth, gospel scientific truth. And nothing could be further from the truth, partly because there's a lack of acknowledgement and realization that medicine isn't an exact science, and it's an applied science, which means it's constantly evolving, but it also means it can be manipulated. And the other side of it is, of course, the medical journals. And again, most doctors don't know this, are reliant on funding from Big Pharma, and often can get millions of dollars for publishing one article on a particular drug. And the way that works is the drug companies will, do a drug trial, publish it in a medical journal, and then it's not just about advertising. They pay the medical journal for reprints of that article that then gets used as marketing material where they can take it to doctors or give it to them at conferences. And one of the most, I think, horrific examples of how this happens or how this works in terms of that whole system was what happened with Vioxx. John Abramson talks about this in the film from Harvard, and this was a blockbuster drug in the late 90s that was initially marketed under being better than ibuprofen as an anti-inflammatory drug because it gave less stomach side effects. The drug company was Merck. The original trials were published in New England Journal of Medicine. And ultimately, it was found that Merck had withheld data showing, even from the beginning, that it increased the risk of cardiovascular events, heart attack, stroke, death by at least 2 to 4-fold, and ultimately probably killed at least 60,000 Americans. Merck were fined almost $1 billion in 2011. But when John Abramson was involved in the litigation process, what he found was that, not only did Merck obviously know about this through internal emails, their chief scientist basically saying it's unfortunate that these cardiovascular effects are there, but the drug will do well and we will do well. But when the FDA wrote to Merck to say, and they realized there was a problem, these heart attacks, for example, and said, you need to put a black box warning on the packaging of Vioxx, what did Merck do? They doubled down on their marketing, and they paid the New England Journal of Medicine, hundreds of thousands of dollars more to get more of those reprints so they could market it to doctors. It's just absolutely shocking.
It's horrifying.
What's the diagnosis here, though? You see, I'm a root cause analysis person. I don't want to say this to be inflammatory, Megyn. It's actually accurate. In the book, The Corporation, and the documentary from well over 20 years ago, there's a new one called The New Corporation, made by law professor Joel Bacan. The preeminent expert in forensic psychology behind psychopathy, Robert Hare, actually diagnoses the corporation as an entity, not individuals, but the entity, the corporation, as being psychopathic in its pursuit for profit. So callous unconcern for the safety of others, incapacity to experience guilt, repeated lying, conning others for profit. And that hasn't changed, and that hasn't been challenged or rebutted. So this is the big problem we have, is that we almost as a society in a way, we've allowed the creation of these big corporations to almost through legal means be psychopathic in the way they make money, and the rest of society suffers. So until we sort that out at the root, this problem is only going to continue.
For those of us who have been holding our breath for the past several months, waiting for this election, we can finally exhale. Work can now be done on the major issues this country's facing, one of the most significant being our national debt. The fact is our nation's broke, and that debt is a house of cards that cannot be quickly dismantled. So the strategy for you probably remains the same when it comes to your investments. You might want to diversify your savings. This is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control, so it can be important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group can help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Text MK to 989898 to get your free info kit on gold. Plus, right now you will receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold and text MK to 989898 to claim your eligibility for free silver today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.